Hey everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to thank everyone who ordered my book, Unprocessed. If you've already ordered it, or if you order it by midnight on Sunday, April 3rd, Pacific time, we will send you an incredible amount of bonuses worth almost $100. That information will be in the show notes on how to get the bonuses if you're going to order in the next 2 weeks or if you've already ordered. I thank you very much for making this book number 326 overall on Amazon today and number 1 in 3 categories. But more important is today's show. I just want to say, in case this is the first time you're seeing me, I never intended to be a YouTuber or have a show, certainly not live and certainly not daily. On March 20th, 2020, our governor ordered sheltering in place, and I am not very good with technology, and I had purchased a new technology that would allow me to go live without having to use Facebook, and I pushed the wrong button, so instead of going live to my private group, I went live everywhere. It went everywhere. And there were like 600 people watching because people really appreciated early on in the pandemic a sense of community and connection. But it got pretty boring, just me every day. So I asked a bunch of my friends, a lot of them you know from the show, medical doctors, chefs, to come on. And a show was born. I really didn't think I was going to be doing it 2 years, but then people kept writing me from all over the world because they wanted to be on the show. And now we booked 6 months in advance. We've done 913 episodes live. I haven't missed a day in 2 years. And today marks the kickoff of the 3rd season of Chef AJ Live with 2 of my favorite human beings. Well, one of them's human for sure, we know, on the planet. They are the co-authors of really the best book I've ever read. It's called The Pleasure Trap. If you haven't read it, especially if you're struggling with your health or your weight, it's a must read. They're the 2 smartest people I know. They probably have a combined IQ of higher than a perfect bowling match. And without them, I would still be what Dr. John McDougall calls a fat vegan. And we're going to get to know a little bit more about them today. We're calling today Back to the Future with Doug and Alan. Please welcome to the show, my friends, Dr. Doug Lyle and Dr. Alan Goldhamer. Thank you so much for doing this special episode with me.
Our pleasure, AJ.
This is going to be so exciting. You guys have been friends, I believe, for close to 55 years now. I mean, that's incredible. That's longer than many people have been in live.
I'm not even 55 years old, AJ. So that.
That's hilarious. Could you tell our viewers what is the secret to having a friendship last longer than most marriages?
Pick a good friend.
Okay.
If you get me started, it's going to be a while. So we better circle back.
Okay. Well, I'm curious, if you 2 hadn't met each other and you were meeting today, maybe at a conference, do you think you'd still become friends?
Yeah, you ask questions like that and you're just asking for trouble. Alan knows how this goes. Alan, just go take a break. Go ahead, hang out with Jennifer for a while I answer. Jennifer used to say that sometimes she wanted to ask me a question when I lived with them, and she'd say she'd have some appointment half an hour, and 10 minutes away. She'd be like, God, I want to ask him the question, but he only has 20 minutes to answer. I don't think I want to get it started.
And that's if it's a yes or no question.
Yeah. But see, it's not a yes or no question. Never. You have to give me alternative choices and narrow. No, that is a huge, interesting question, almost unbelievably interesting. So what the questioner thinks they're asking is, do you guys have like spontaneous chemistry as friends that happened when you were young? And the answer is no. We did not have spontaneous chemistry that happened. It's going to turn out that friendship, as all human relationships, are trading processes. So something is being exchanged. Okay, so in a romance, in a family and marriage, what's being exchanged is tremendous amounts of time and energy and your DNA. Okay, and so that's what that is. Those are the most intensive and important exchanges that there are, which is why the stakes are so great emotionally. in commercial trades, there's still an exchange process going on, but there might not be any emotional process to speak of. I just want to buy, AJ's book, and this bookseller wants to sell it to me, and that's that. It's no big deal. It's a 3-second exchange process. Actually, more of that's going on. A certain amount of my time and energy is involved in getting that exchange, and a certain amount of time and energy on their part to have it organized to do it. But it's still an exchange process. That's the quote relationship that we have. The friendships are somewhere in the middle. In other words, friendships are very, they vary from very casual, minor friendships, of which a little bit of time and energy is exchanged, all the way to tremendously central friendships in a person's life where a great deal of time and energy is being exchanged. So you don't know from the jump that you're going to exchange a great deal of time and energy with a friend. I mean, you may see in a romantic partner the potential that you would be willing to, or think and hope that you might do such a thing, but you wouldn't even know then. Okay, there is no such thing as love at first sight, because you don't know enough about anybody to possibly know you would make such a tremendous deep exchange with them. When you exchange, you don't just exchange, you don't just trade, you actually make the best trade available, okay, at the time. So, you may buy, for example, a ream of paper at a store that you're in, like you're at FedEx, and it's $6.99 a ream, and you're like, yeah, it's more than the $4.99 I saw at the store the other day, but I'm already here, so it's the best deal, and I can get it off my list, so therefore this is the best exchange, okay? So the question is, if Alan and I met today, at a conference, would we become the kind of friends that we are? Well, the likely answer is no, but there's actually one reason why we might, and it's not what anybody would think, okay? If we were to actually figure out why that would be true, first of all, I wouldn't even be at a health conference, and I wouldn't know what I know if it wasn't for Alan. So I wouldn't be in a position to appreciate who he is, who, by the way, when we go on in this thing later on, we've got plenty of time. I know we've got plenty of time. I got plenty of time. No, this guy, when it comes to health in the 21st century, when the 21st century is written, I may be the only one that would do this, but this guy goes on Mount Rushmore. I don't know that anybody else I know goes on that, but this guy would go on my Mount Rushmore, and I'll tell you more about that later. Okay, there's reasons why that's true in my judgment. Now, when it comes to us being friends, the reason why we would be friends today wouldn't be because of some spontaneous great chemistry. But something, the reason why it would be true today is the same reason it was true 54 years ago. And that is that we both have a love of basketball. And so when we would not be the friends that we are today if it weren't for two people and some circumstances. One of those people is a guy named Chick Hearn, okay? So Chick Hearn was the Hall of Fame radio announcer for the Los Angeles Lakers. The second was Jerry West. So Jerry West was a handsome guy that played guard. Well, guess who? One of us is handsome. The other does the best he can. Yeah, the truth is both of us played guard. And we knew, and we happened to both love basketball. We didn't love tennis, okay? We didn't love bowling. We didn't love football. We didn't love golf. We happened to both love basketball, and we happened to both be well above average athletically. And so then basketball itself is a very interesting game, incredibly unusual game, and it's actually unique in any major sport. And that is that it's unique in its demands for optimization of basketball playing. It's unique in its demands for unselfish cooperation. Okay, so football does not. Quarterback, so could throw the long bomb and show off his arm, but he's going to get benched immediately, and nobody will play with him if he does that. He has to play within a scheme. The offensive tackle doesn't have any grandstanding that they can do. They have to do their job. There is no grandstanding. Baseball, there is no grandstanding. Okay. Soccer, there really isn't any grandstanding. Basketball is unique. The guy with the ball can do a bunch of fancy stuff and throw up a bunch of shitty shots and try to get glory for himself to show off for the girls. He can do that and hurt his team. In fact, that is the biggest problem if you're a basketball coach, is that problem. Okay. When Ellen and I met as kids, we were both enamored with basketball, and we found out early, very early, that both of us were extremely unusual. I don't mean just a little bit unusual. I mean extremely unusual. Both of us played the game with a long-term self-discipline vision of how to optimize the resources available to the team in order to optimize the team's performance. Nobody else did that. And as a result, both of us were disgusted with the other people that we played with, which remains true 54 years later. We go out on a basketball court and we play as on a team. We always make sure we play with each other. We're not going to take any other answer. We're going to play with each other. And then at the end of the game, we're going to walk off disgusted. You're going to walk off disgusted with the other three players. Okay. A unique, unusual levels of self-discipline in a long-term scheme. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Okay. So that is why today, if I met him at a conference, I would have to know that he was a serious ball player. Okay. It also helps that we were similarly athletically. Alan's bigger and stronger and faster, but I'm quicker. And so as a result, we are very well suited. And not only that, I'm a natural point guard and Alan's a shooting guard. Okay, so we didn't play the same position. And as a result, all of those historical factors are the reason why that got us together. And basketball, like I said, unique in sports, allows you, not only are you interdependent on other people, but you also in basketball, see, it is an incredible Rorschach to find out about their personalities. Okay, so there's nice guys I played with that play pretty good. Fine, whatever. Unusual to find somebody incredibly disciplined, absolutely thinking the same way you're thinking about optimizing the big picture optimally. That and the self-discipline and no ego involved there. No, that you're almost never find that. So if we went out today, if I found out that he was a ball player at a conference and then we somehow were in the same town and we got together and we played, I would immediately recognize that this was extremely unusual. Okay. And I'd be like, hey, you want to play next week? You got a team. And then this friendship would form again. So in some ways, the statistical odds against this were very high. It's not like I met this guy and said, wow, what a great personality. No, everybody just gave Alan 15 feet wide berth. We were in the same grade school. Yeah, 15 feet wide berth. No, this was not a guy that was, this was about as warm and fuzzy as, I don't know, porcupine. The teachers were afraid of this guy. They kept their distance.
Yep.
So
that's all true.
That's the story. That's why it is that we are here, is because we learned, and we learned it deeper and deeper and deeper the more we played. We're both serious players. We played all the way through high school and after, and for another 50 years. And so, you know, I almost never run into anybody that thinks about the game the way I do, in really from the psychological, emotional, personality aspect, and almost never meet my equal in that regard of how it is that people play the game. So that is the reason we're friends, and that's the reason why we would be friends again. You had to ask that question to get it. How about that, Al? Pretty good.
Well, yeah, what he said. It's slightly different for me. The basketball thing is absolutely true, but I'm also really value in other people. And I knew even from the very beginning, I was much quicker to recognize Doug's value than Doug was to recognize my value. Because Doug was always very personable, socially appropriate, very popular, kind of, well integrated. That wasn't the situation with me. But I recognized that, he was a lot smarter than the other people, i.e. he was processing information in a more valuable way than me. And so that was what got me interested, even before I saw the basketball, personality spilling out. And that's really what basketball does. You put people on a basketball court and you can tell who they really are really quickly. They can't hide it. You can hide it under social appropriateness, but you can't. Once you get on the basketball court, you can see what the real personality is. And so, even before that, I recognized the value because he was processing information in a very efficient way. It was very valuable to me, and I recognized that. And so was willing to modify my behavior acceptably enough as it related to him so that I could become socially acceptable. He paid a big price socially for being even in close proximity to me. So I had to make myself valuable enough and be appropriate enough that the price he was paying wouldn't be excessively high. And that's why it took a little while to kind of break that, make that sale and break that one down. But, eventually it did. And then, as he pointed out, if you value the actual personality of the individual you're dealing with, then it's just a question of exchange. If a person has a good enough brain and they're processing information in a valuable way, so it makes you better. They talk about some people on a basketball court that they play in a way that makes everybody around them better. So they play in a way to accentuate not only their own skills, but also to take advantage of the other skills. That was really true in basketball. Doug has a lot of ability to handle the ball, and he's quick and he does all that. That's not something I do well. I got to kind of just have somebody else create the opening and then, hit the shot or do whatever it's going to be. And so whenever I played basketball, I always played a lot better if I was playing with Doug because he played in a way that took advantage of the skills I had. And the same thing's true in life. We talk about when we had this concept of the pleasure trap, and I came up with a name and he wrote the book. And, I felt like that was a fair exchange, you know what I mean? Because after all, the title's like really important. I wanted him to be able to participate. And so, him actually writing the book was his contribution. But in that way, we were able to work together in coming up with a really valuable product. That couldn't happen by hiring a writer. In other words, you couldn't hire a writer that would come up with conceptual development. You have to have somebody that actually has to think those processes through. He does that better than anybody that I've met. And so therefore that's very valuable to me, so valuable that whatever personality deficits or characteristics you have that somebody else might not think is ideal doesn't even register for me. I couldn't care less about any of that. I'm only interested in the gold at the end of the rainbow there, that pot of gold.
All right.
When you guys play basketball, are you playing against each other or are you on the same team usually?
When we're playing in a game situation, we're going to try really hard to always play together. Playing against him defeats a lot of the purpose. I don't get to take advantage of the fact that he's able to create the openings and create the situation where I'm able to do what I can do best. It's very frustrating playing with people where if you do everything right and then they don't get the ball to you when they're supposed to get the ball to you, or they don't take advantage of the screen or the whatever it is, you put a lot of effort out without seeing the return. When I play with Doug, I know what's going to happen. You already know how it's going to work out. And that's why we can play completely undermanned. If he and I are together, even if we're completely undermanned, we're going to be competitive regardless. So it makes up for not being tall or big or strong or whatever it is. You can make up for a lot of it with appropriate play. Interestingly enough, that's actually what our love of the game is. Our love of the game is actually, we actually know that, I know to go on about this, I'm sure we got a bunch of people that couldn't care less, but these are interesting principles. And that is that are actually the joy in that game for us is essentially testing how valuable is our personality and intelligence
Right.
relative to other people's superiority in size and strength and athleticism. And it really is an interesting thing, like just how much can we take advantage of effectively our brain superiority. And that's what to us, I mean, obviously we like to hit shots and make plays, but the truth is can we outthink them? And so Alan and I have been a pair of people looking to outthink competitors forever. And so that's a hell of a person to have on your team, I'll tell you that.
You know, and it really extends into this health field as well, because we've been trying to figure out, you know, how to do it right, how to overcome the challenges at figuring out how to do it right, how to communicate that, publish that. You know, it's surprisingly difficult, even when you're right, being able to effectively communicate that, because there's a lot of forces of evil out there and forces of self-interest that look to undermine it. That's really part of the challenge there, just like there's challenges trying to play basketball when you're not tall, strong, good, fast, whatever. There's challenges when it comes to competing in the marketplace for information exchange. And that's essentially what we're in the business of doing, is coming up with ways of figuring out how to do something and then sharing that information in a way that's meaningful to other people.
Dr. Lyle, do you think you would have found your way to a plant-based diet had it not been for Dr. Goldhamer?
Not a chance. There's no way. There's no reason that ever would have occurred to me. And so and quite frankly, so much of the discussion around plant-based living doesn't have anything to do with well-documented science or intelligently integrated theory.
Right.
And so it is exceedingly unlikely that ever would have happened. So this is him getting that right, and getting it right early was of inestimable value to me.
That's great. I'm curious, what annoys you most about each other?
Well, the thing that annoys me most about Doug is how consistently right he is. And so, you know, I've learned over the years to just, you know, when he's arguing a point, I'm always trying to look for a possible weak link or a crack in the thinking, and every once in a while, you know, you get a little chip in the thing, and then just drill right into that little chip. But it happens very rarely. I mean, I can remember the times it happens. That's how frustrating it is. Very, very difficult competing with somebody who's able to consistently process information rapidly and in a correct way.
Dr. Lyle, what annoys you most about Dr. Goldhamer? And I don't know if the show is long. I don't know if we have enough time.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think about that. I don't really know. I think if I really think about what has ever annoyed me, I think we've had, you know, you live 50 years with somebody, you're going to have some conflicts of interest. And so there's, in those conflicts of interest, you know, you end up, you end up having to, you learn some things about yourself, and you learn some things about the other person. You figure out what conflicts are people in, whether they're marriage, friendship, or between you and your insurance company. What they are is that people have essentially they have conflicts of how it is that they see what's valuable, and how things should be evaluated. These are conflicts of evaluation, and so it's going to turn out like, when I think back, we've had, I mean, I don't know, we've had 100 arguments or 50. We've had, and I would say probably, not to be echoing him, but there's going to be times when I would say when I was, his position on something would be socially uncomfortable, seem extreme, seem punitive to other people, seem sanctimonious, and unfriendly. And I would essentially, in those arguments, be the champion of the common man and saying, no, you're out of line. You're pushing it too hard. You're being unrealistic. You're being shitty about this. In other words, and I would sort of be taking on that the common man or woman's position, and he would dig in his heels. You know, in other words, you find out with people, if you're with them long enough, through enough depth of enough conversations, you discover some things about how they're constructed that you wouldn't otherwise know until a lot of pressure is put on a point. And Alan is he has things that are very important to him, and he's not going to be persuadable by what the emotional consequences are that to anybody. And that is where I would say that is less true of me. Now we are, I'm pretty tough. And so, the joke is that nowadays when I'm talking general psychology more than health psychology, on Beat Your Genes, that I'm like dad and Jen Hawk's like mom. So you want the soft thing, you ask Jen. You want it real, you want it straight, you talk to me. So I'm no softy at all. But relative to Alan, I am. Okay, I'm the softy between the two of us, without a doubt. And I can remember times when I felt like he was being too hardcore. I can remember a few times that were important when I felt like he was being too hardcore. And in retrospect, I'm thinking of an important one now, when I was disappointed in a decision that he made. And yet it turned out that decision was part of an overall wider scheme, and he was right. He won't remember what this decision was. It had to do with a good friend of mine that really needed help, and I wanted him to come to TrueNorth. And it turned out that it would not have been the right thing. Okay, and so that, but it's, I remember being frustrated with how Alan was managing that, and yet when it was all over, it's like, damn, I can't believe, somebody, when people are pulling at somebody's elbow, wanting them to get them to do something, no matter how much they plead, be careful who that person is that's in charge. I mean, think about this, for example, with respect to any kind of leadership, the presidency of the United States or something of incredible importance. And that is that you better not be somebody that's very persuadable. You better not, no matter how loud the squawking is and how uncomfortable anybody is, you better have someone that absolutely sticks to high principle. Those better be what's guiding the decisions. Okay. And so I would say that is, so it's something that has periodically annoyed me, certainly about Alan's personality, but you could hardly call it a foible, and you couldn't call it a weakness. You would just call it a moments of illumination as to our personality differences. I'm inherently softer. I'm inherently more empathic with other people. And sometimes those are going to be better decisions. Tipping waitresses, being friendly. Okay, I'm going to make a lot of little decisions that are actually going to be better than he's going to do. And he's going to annoy me when he's going to start to do it wrong because of some inherent low dial on the sensitivity meter that he has. He will have a point. He's not going to treat anybody poorly because they didn't deserve it. But if they deserved it, he will. And I'll be like, why are you doing that? You don't know the backstory of this person. You don't know, i.e., those are the kinds of things that, of the 100 things that have annoyed me, there's been 80 of those. And that if we had a judge and jury somewhere in the sky, they would vote for me on those 80. On maybe 90, but on the 10 big ones, I would say that he was probably always right. Okay, and that's because that's the difference in our personality. On those times when I would have bent and shouldn't have, but that's because I'm more normal. And so Alan is unusual in his, as he used to say, irritated with other people. Never said it to me, but he said that person needs a steel ramrod rammed up their spine, for God's sake. Well, he was born with that. He had steel in his spine. So that's what I would say about that.
All right. Thank you so much. This is so much fun. Okay. All right. What is the most important thing that each of you learned from the other person?
Well, as I said, that's probably the most important thing I learned was that I have vulnerability in making decisions where sometimes my empathy could put me into a situation where I might make mistakes. I probably wouldn't have known that had I not had such an unusual person so close to me involved in some of those decisions, and then watching the consequences when he didn't make those decisions. So that's, i.e., sometimes it's very tough to make tough decisions. So that's maybe one of the most important things I learned. There's been many things. Go ahead, Al.
I remember when we were talking about what we were going to do when we were in junior high or whatever it was, and I remember thinking, well, you take somebody that's got a problem, health problem, whatever, and you teach them how to get it right, and then they'll do that. And you said, well, no, they won't do that. What they'll do is they'll do that until they're no longer motivated by pain, debility, fear of death, whatever it is. And then they're going to slip and slide back to their old behaviors and the behaviors that are reinforced by other people around them. And I said, well, that's ridiculous. If you know why you got sick and you really understand it, and then you did something and got better, that's it. You're not going to go back and do the stuff that causes problems. And you insisted, no, yes, they will, because they're going to forget, and there's social pressures, and there's this. And I remember being so vehement that, like, how could you be so foolish to think that people are just going to do things, even though they know that's not maybe the best decision? And I was so shocked to actually learn, no, you were right. And the problem is, you're right about a lot of those kind of things. And so even though I was absolutely vehement, no, I haven't figured out, this is how it is. Turns out, no, it's not that way. And now I've learned, oh, okay, just because I think people ought to do something like this, or this is in their best interest, that's really irrelevant in terms of predicting what decisions they're going to make. So you had a different, it's not that you disagreed with me about what would be in their best interest. It's you disagreed with what their prediction of their behavior was going to be. And you actually predict it much, much, much more accurately. And so that's been, and of course, we're struggling now in our research, trying to figure out what's the big issue. We kind of know how to get most people that have most problems well. So if they have high blood pressure, they have diabetes, they're overweight, we know if they engage in this set of behaviors, they're going to get a very high likelihood of resolving their problem. It may not be the only way to do it, but it's a way that works. We have it. But then for some reason, when people do that, even when they're successful, when they go home, they struggle. So we're trying to figure out, okay, what can we do to support, encourage, entice, bribe, intimidate, whatever people, so they can be more successful longer. And it's this huge problem for me, particularly because I don't really appreciate how difficult it is for them to do it once the pattern's been established. You've been a little bit more in touch with that, but even you have trouble figuring out exactly what the best combination of strategies is to help a person be successful long-term. And the problem with our research is that we can get them well, but we got to keep them well to be impressive. And so now we're trying to add all these education features and different things, which are not as easy as just locking them up and not feeding them or something. We have to solve that, though, if we're going to be successful in the long run, which is to get people well and keep them well. And that's really what the game was when we set it out, was how can you get people well, but more importantly, how can you keep them well? How can we not necessarily focus on life extension, because we already know that how long people live is largely determined by luck and genetics, but how well they live. Now that's really where the goal is. How can we reduce debility? But that unfortunately requires compliance and adherence. At first I thought, well, it's real simple. When we bring them to the center, they get well. So let's just not let them go home. We just keep them at the center indefinitely. And I think that would work. The problem is apparently it's not practical, because you can't just keep everybody there. And so now I'm hoping that you'll come do a better job than we've been able to do it, figuring out how do you get people that are well, staying well by manipulating the behaviors.
I'm not frozen. Okay,
Oh, boy.
here we go.
Charles, we have some freezing here.
I can hear you, AJ. I can't hear Doug now.
Can you hear me now?
Okay,
Yes.
good. I think we had just a little Zoom glitch. Okay, thank you. I'm so glad to, when I go like this, it means something's happening. Okay, continue, please, Dr.
Yeah.
Goldhamer.
No,
Or
I'm saying that,
Dan,
what I've learned is that people make decisions from complex means, including psychological ones, which are quite annoying.
That's great. All right. So what was it like working on this book together? And I just want to say, you can tell a lot about your personalities by the way you signed the book. So Dr. Lyle signed it, a little drawing, to AJ, you're one of a kind, always a great pleasure. And then Dr. Goldhamer says, beware of the pleasure trap. You tell a lot right there.
that's actually really interesting. That is exactly what you're looking at. The Alan actually, when he in his last answer, he's pointing out a great example of a higher principle that it's important in the whole discussion about who we are and how we've gone about things, and that is that human beings are unique in their ability to try to predict what other people are going to do by essentially putting themselves into the other person's shoes. So this is a critical part of human self-consciousness and their ability to transport themselves into a different set of situations. There would be many reasons why this would be super valuable that I'm not going to get into here. But the fact that we do it is obvious, and it wouldn't do you any good you wouldn't have any feelings watching a movie if you weren't transported inside the other person and then having feelings similar to the ones that they're expressing. Okay, so and understanding the circumstances that they're in, and therefore understanding why they're making the decisions that they're making, etc. This is human nature. Now the thing is that one of the really interesting things about human nature to me is that, so you can imagine if you had a person that couldn't put themselves in other person's shoes, then they would often be very bewildered, and they would make poor predictions about what other people are going to do, because they wouldn't be picking up the clues and they wouldn't be having the feelings that the other person was having. Okay, so obviously it's extremely valuable to have that characteristic. However, what nature did, and as far as evolution got, was to just plunk your own personality inside that other person's head, and to just say, well, if I were them, I would do this in those circumstances. Okay. So one of the curious things about this to me is that in man-woman relationships, that's what happens. So men will plop themselves into a woman's head, bringing a man's frame of reference. That's why you get guys, on dating apps without their shirts on, okay? Because they're like, wow, I'd really like to see the women without their shirts on, so they'd probably really like to see me without my shirt on. And it turns out it's not true, okay? So it turns out that we don't actually have, as males, good intuition about what's going on in a female's head, and females don't have good intuition about what's going on in a man's head. You bring your gender bias with you. More generally, this is going to be what we call the egocentric bias. And the author Harry Brown actually calls it the identity trap. And that is that you are thinking that other people are going to be thinking and feeling the way it is that you're thinking and feeling. Okay. And so that's what Alan was actually just talking about. And that is that Alan, being the really unusual personality outlier that he is, couldn't understand why other people, once they'd see the light, the light wouldn't stay on. Just didn't make any sense to him. Whereas it made more sense to me, since I'm not quite as much of an outlier. It made plenty of sense to me to do what he said, but it didn't make sense. But it made sense to me. I also had a better intuition about other people, okay, for that very reason. So now today we find that, quite frankly, the pleasure trap is the biggest health problem in the world. And it may be sum total the most important problem with respect to human happiness. There's quite a few problems with human happiness, but notice the tagline, the secondary title of our book that Alan also figured out. Pleasure trap was good, but that's a typical Alan, like 2 seconds, it just comes to him. They don't give him any credit for that. That's just sort of, that just arrives, without any thought. But the subtitle he thought about very carefully. And so I was grinding on that problem and sort of chasing my tail for a long time. And Alan finally sat down and focused for about 12 minutes and came up with that. And as soon as I saw it, it's like, no, that's exactly right. Mastering the hidden force that undermines health and happiness. Now, pay attention to that title, because there's a tremendous amount of information in that title. That's not just some cutesy title. Pleasure trap already tells you there's something very scary and fishy going on. Something pleasurable is luring you into something, but it's a trap. Okay, so we already know that there's something serious here, and it's dangerous. And then mastering the hidden force that undermines health and happiness. Okay, it's a hidden force that's undermining the most important things that there are. And book is about mastering that. Well, mastering tells you don't master something easily. You master something that is extremely difficult. Okay, so we're talking about the mastery of something that is extremely difficult, about the most important things that there are. That's what this book is about. Okay. This book and the concepts, I should say, in this book, the hell with the book. The concepts that we're talking about there remain the most unappreciated, misunderstood concepts in all of health. Okay. People think that they're going to tell their friends about the great news about plant-based this or that. First of all, identity trap right away. You have no idea who it is that you're talking to. You have a completely different set of perspectives and personality characteristics. They're nothing like you. Your daughter isn't anything like you. Okay? Your daughter, who will not listen to you and is 50 pounds overweight, and yet you lost that 50 pounds, and you're 52 years old and she's 28 years old and trying to get on the mating market and can't get a husband and is really miserable and unhappy and is disgusted, and you can't even talk to her because you tried to talk to her 50 times about this problem and she won't listen, and she's trying every other diet and she won't listen to you no matter how many experts you pound down her throat. Okay, you are not understanding the pleasure trap. Okay. You're making the mistake that Alan made once he figured out what it was, that he's like, what is the problem? You just do it. And it's like, oh no, 40 years later, it turns out you don't just do it. So pleasure trap, we have come to understand more than we did 20 years ago when we wrote this thing. Okay, so we sat in green chairs till 2 a.m, over and over again, going over every word, every paragraph, plotting out the next chapter, etc. Jennifer would, go to bed, put earplugs in her ears, like doesn't want to listen to it. Okay. So 20 years after, what we find is it's completely underestimated. So people continue to believe that this is a simple matter of information. It is not even close to a simple matter of information. The problem is what it takes to help people attack the pleasure trap is pretty sophisticated psychologically. It takes a whole sort of cinemascope of conceptual tools about psychology, but that's not what anybody wants to do. Everybody wants to essentially tell the story. Here's the information, and isn't it great? And I did it, and go do it. Never going to happen. And we can see that people are listening to AJ 1,000 shows later. Why? Because they didn't just listen once, get the information, get convinced, and then go do it and not have a problem. It turns out, oh no, this is a mastery problem. Okay, this is like learning to hit a 1-iron into the wind at Pebble Beach right when you need it in the U.S. Open. This is a lifetime of practice and a lifetime of effort and a lifetime of knowledge seeking. What seems like it ought to be easy isn't even close to easy. So, yeah, to me, I'm actually quite uninterested and frustrated in talking about health issues, health questions, etc., because I feel like, you know what, we know the answers. Here's the answer that you need. The answer you need is all the little details and all the encouragement and all the social support and situational attention to detail to help you beat the pleasure trap. That's what you need. And you know what? That's not learning the next cool thing to tell your friends or settle an argument about protein or beans or how much iron you need or anything like that. No, that's not the most important thing at all.
In fact, we've created essentially a prison camp where people can enforce those behavioral changes because we removed so many of the social issues by creating the TrueNorth Health Center, where you come in and they say it's like a prison camp. It's not true though, because in prison they give you bread and water. Whereas at TrueNorth, it's like, just water, and you can get that. We remove the temptations, we remove everything. And then the problem is people have to go home. And that's where the pleasure trap comes in. At the center, we've done our best to remove most of those issues so they can at least experience what it feels like to do it right. But the trick, the little catch is that then they have to go out and continue to live in the real world. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
Dr. Goldhamer, what was the process of working with Dr. Lyle on the book like for you?
So the thing with Doug that's a little bit frustrating for me, because he's a very skilled writer, but he's also a procrastinator. So the trick is to corral him, to get him in front of the actual computer. Once he's actually got the distraction things in his life out of the way for the day and sits down in front of the computer, he vomits up like 700 to 800 words an hour of really articulate, interesting stuff that I couldn't wait to read. But it was quite tricky getting him actually sitting down each night in front of the computer, because there was always other people's problems and, life and relatives and girlfriends and wives and all those other, really distracting things. And so pushing all that stuff else out of the way so that he would actually just write. And what was really frustrating is every time he sat down, he ended up coming up with really good product. And so after 2 years, the pleasure trap was really formed. It could have been done maybe in 3 months if there just hadn't been all that other life distractions.
Have either of you either personally struggled with the pleasure trap or your weight? Because it's interesting that you know so much about it, but I don't think you guys have this problem.
What problem?
Well, I don't think either of you have been overweight or obese or even members of your family or really struggled with the pleasure trap, have you?
Well, no, I mean, once you understand the pleasure trap, then you just do it, create an environment that supports it. And we've been really fortunate, where when we were doing the pleasure trap, we lived on the same property, in the same house, we had the same environment. So there's certainly no distraction there. And at the TrueNorth Health Center, it's really easy because that's all there is. There's healthy food choices and you don't have to shop and chop and do all the hard work that everybody else is having to do. So we had it relatively easy. All we had to do is, eat and work.
Wow. Well, Dr. Goldhamer, the fact that Dr. Lyle still has these indiscretions with carrot cake, do you think he's more susceptible to the pleasure trap
Well,
than
you know,
you
I
are?
know occasionally when you say indiscretions, I think he's defined what he find acceptable behavior for his particular health risks and whatever. So if he'll indulge in some piece of vegan carrot cake, yes, I think it will eventually catch up with him. But the problem is it's so limited, it's going to take a long time. I keep hoping though, by the time we reach our 80s, maybe our 90s, he'll have aged out just a little quicker because we're about the same age. And I'll finally be able to beat him because, and I'll of course attribute it to that piece of vegan carrot cake, but in reality, it's probably going to be more having to do with genes.
To answer your question more reasonably, the answer is no. Neither one of us has had any significant problem with the pleasure trap. I am inherently more open and less disciplined, essentially more normal of a human, which is a good thing, because if both of us had been as unusual as Alan, we wouldn't have ever really understood the pleasure trap and had any intuition about it at all.
No.
So it's a good thing that I understand what how that would work and how it does work, and I understand the lure certainly perfectly well. But no, the answer is one of the reasons why we're able to stand over to the side and be appalled by the pleasure trap is because and not intimidated by it, is because it is not so potent on us, and yet we see to our horror how what destruction it wreaks on human life writ large. And so that's
I know we've had it a little easier than most too, because I know I got started very young, and so I never had the drink or had the coffee or had the alcohol or the drug, and you don't miss what you don't know. So somebody that's gotten involved in behaviors that now has to give up those behaviors, they're paying a price for giving up, even though they think the benefit might be good. They'll be happier and healthier not drinking than drinking. They have to give up the benefits they got, the social disinhibition, the ability, whatever it is, the taste, the feeling, the dopamine stimulation in the brain, whatever. There is a price that's being paid for giving up. Otherwise, people wouldn't have continued to engage in those behaviors. And so not having engaged in the behaviors, you don't really have the price. You just have the conceptual benefit. So I think it's easier for those of us that start early than those that people have to learn new behaviors, when they get older. I think it's a bigger challenge for them. And I think some people's nervous systems are different than other people's. They're more reactive, more responsive. I remember you gave me that test about agreeableness and disagreeableness. So I don't remember which vehicle we did, but when we did this test, it turned out that you rate people from 0 to 100 percentile, and 100 percentile means you'd be the most agreeable, and 0 percentile would be the least agreeable. And he gave me this test, and I came out 0 percentile. And then you gave me a different test, which was entirely different, because that came out 1 percentile. But apparently there's no 0 percentile on that marking system. And so as disagreeable as Doug thought he was, it turns out I'm even more disagreeable as far as the objective standards.
Yeah, that was actually incredible, because I never would have predicted that. And yet I watched Alan make the answers on that. So I've met super disagreeable people that are far more disagreeable than Alan. But what we see, that is what the elements are of that same sort of cast iron sort of integrity that I talked about earlier, i.e., no, we're not doing it that way because that's not the right way of doing it. That's where you see the disagreeable in Alan come out. That's also something that a lack of that is what makes healthy living basically impossible for a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people, if you're 80th percentile agreeable, this is going to be unbelievably difficult for you, unless you're surrounded by people that are super health oriented. Then you'll be fine. But if you're surrounded by conventional people that are in the pleasure trap and you're at the 80th percentile for agreeable, you're unfortunately, you're about sunk. it's going to be almost impossible for you.
We talk about that in the pleasure trap, the idea that, socially appropriate, healthy, nice, kind, loving, gentle people that care about what other people think have to work a lot harder at overcoming everything than people that really don't care that much what other people's opinions are.
Yeah.
And because this is so far outside the norm, if you engage in these behaviors that are consistent with healthy living, you are a standard, 2 standard deviations out in behavior mode from everybody else. And that makes other people uncomfortable. And if you don't like seeing other people uncomfortable, you're going to modify your behavior so as not to hurt them and not to make them feel so bad, because you feel bad that they feel bad. So now I'm recognizing that that's a characteristic. And I don't hold people, like if people are loving, caring people, I don't hold that against them. I realize now that that's their personality and they just have to overcome it. It's just one of those things that people have to overcome.
Yeah.
Well, do you think that someone should devise a test to see how vulnerable they are? And if they know they're not going to succeed, don't try?
No, I think that it's not about not trying. It's just recognizing the amount of effort you have to put in is even more than the person that maybe like me, that would be relatively easier for.
Well, yeah, I think that's accurate.
Okay, I just want to thank Susanna, Angela, and Sandra for their super chat donations. And thank you, Deb, for these bells. Okay, so the next question is, I know you guys have a respect for each other, and I'm curious if there's something that you found in the other where you're pretty convinced that they're wrong about.
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's anything. I think if anything, Alan has. I think we've articulated that he learned that he was an outlier with respect to the self-disciplinary problems required to beat the pleasure trap, and so so certainly we would have had that argument. I think, strangely enough. Alan is a really extremely competent business executive. However, if he were vulnerable to a mistake, it would have been that he would have overestimated people's self-discipline and their intelligence. In other words, he would have thought that everybody would flock to this. So had you asked him, I'm certainly no genius at predicting public demand, but I famously, just to go upside down on this, I was an original editor of the China study, and I was reading it when I was living with Alan. And actually, when we were engaged in, even though the China study was published after the pleasure trap, but I was reading it while we were still working on the pleasure trap. So I was reading the original manuscripts that Colin and Tom were writing. And Alan said, "Well, how is it?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's really good, but it won't sell at all. There's no way this is going to sell. This is way too dry and academic, and it's too long. The arguments are too long. No, this is a loser. Nobody's going to read it." Now that's me sort of, again, what am I doing? I'm underestimating the public. I think Alan would generally overestimate the public. In other words, been thinking that they would have seen and grabbed this truth and seen its value, because he saw its value very, very early in life. So yeah, but I don't know. But in general, right or wrong about approaches or anything else, no. I think it's probably us struggling with respect to the pleasure trap, struggling with how it is. Oh, I know. I actually arrived at what I think we haven't, possibly a disagreement, and actually it has important implications career-wise and for what's happened in the last 10 or 15 years between the two of us. And that is that there came a time when I basically said, you know what, this problem is way bigger than we thought. It's way harder than we thought. And in fact, the people that we can help are way narrower than we thought. And so guess what, Al? Alan was in principle and still is in principle sort of out to get the entire message to the whole world in principle. I have in some ways abandoned that project. And so, yeah, so you're going to get a long answer from me. Sorry, everybody, but this is how this goes. So I said, this will get to the Mount Rushmore issue. So well, maybe we'll get to that later. But Alan has been determined that this was not only was it right that he had the right direction, but it wasn't only right, but it was unbelievably valuable. In fact, it was the most valuable information in the world. And so therefore, somehow the world is going to see this and they're going to get it. Okay. And I came to the conclusion, maybe somewhere between 2005 and 2010, that I started to realize, you know what, this is too hard for the species that I'm now understanding more fully, that I'm now seeing. My intuition is starting to tell me that that we're not talking about 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or 70% of humanity that we can help. We're talking about 5. Okay. And so that actually shifted my own personal life priorities. And so Alan has been out to try to essentially get this to the whole enchilada, for good reason, because every damn person, this would be the most important information every damn person would ever get. And so I understand that. And so we were largely on the same page, but I was already, in other words, the dynamic tension between us around these issues goes to the difference that me having a little better intuition about the common man and woman than he did. And so therefore he's a little more determined and a little more hardcore, and a little more like, no, they'll get it because they have to get it because it's the most important thing. And I'm like, nah. By 2010, you could sort of divide my career into a couple of major projects, both of which are super interrelated. So obviously, it's understanding the human mind, motivation, decisions, life experience, happiness, self-confidence, self-esteem, all of these things. And so the thing that Alan brought to the table, the information that he brought to the table, it has enormous implications for all those things. And it turns out that the problems that are associated with dealing with the pleasure trap wind up being remarkably complicated and subtle and immensely challenging, and a tremendous amount of conceptual development was done in my career in order to address those problems. By 5 years after the publication of the pleasure trap, I'm looking at that thing and I think, you know what, I think I've said everything that I have to say. And I think that the problem is so difficult that it's now about just preaching to the people who are already highly susceptible and interested, but we cannot go after the whole enchilada. It's too hard. Alan, meanwhile, is like, no, one of the problems is that they don't know enough. And if you would get off your ass and be a decent research director, then we're going to do this and we will shove this down the world's throat, which, by the way, includes all the plant-based doctors that actually don't understand what Alan understands. So forget, those are great guys, but the truth is they don't know what Alan knows. And so so I'm like, you know what, I don't have the stomach for it. And so there was a period of years where I'm starting to drift away and we're no longer exactly going the same direction, which remains true to this day. Yeah. And and this is the fundamental reason And so I have sort of two things that I then start wandering into a new domain, which is highly interrelated. It's the same issues. It's health, happiness, self-esteem, self-confidence, unnecessary misery, except that it turns out that you can address unnecessary miseries associated with the mismatch between the modern world and the Stone Age world. You can address those in pure psychotherapy and in concept that I can talk about. And, a few years ago, a young lady wandered onto the property at TrueNorth named Jen Hawk, who would then become Dr. Jen Hawk. And she would be now my co-author of my second and probably final book. So these two people, if you're going to start to talk about happiness and relationships and people and the other aspects of this, you're going to have a chick. Like Alan just isn't going to do it. You know what I mean? Isn't going to fly. Okay. So what has happened is that we remain, like Alan and I, whenever we talk about anything, we have a tremendous integration of how it is that we think about the world. And that is, that has never changed and never will. But what's happened is that we've drifted off into two directions. He now has a top flight, super smart research director who has done great. They've done great work together. And Alan is going to shove this down the world's throat. He will make them see that this is he's going to do it. Whether we will see, we won't live long enough to see the implications of everything that he's up to. Okay, but we're going to be able to see a lot of it. Hopefully, if we live another 30, maybe 40 years, we're going to be able to see just how much corn this guy winds up sprouting from all the seeds that he's planted. Yeah, he's been planting seeds for 40 years. He's going to probably got another 40 years. I know that that's what he's up to. I have gone into a related but somewhat different domain. And so the book Jen and I are writing will have the pleasure trap concepts in it. People will sniff and they will see some of the same conceptual foundations, but there'll be chick talk, relationships, love. We're not going to have Alan talking about love and friendships and stuff like that. No. So that's where this goes. And so he's got a team, and he has now takes a long time to accomplish the kinds of things that he is now able to accomplish, and he will accomplish more. But fundamentally, what are we both dealing with? We're dealing with respect to the pleasure trap and all its related issues. Who are the people? How many of them can you help? And the ones that are struggling, what would be the best way to help those individuals? Those are the most important questions in the field. And they're the ones that very few people out there that are trying to help actually have anything close to the conceptual tools to try to address it optimally. So we do the very best we can, but I know this is a hell of a tough battle.
Weeks at 1 year, trying to assess, okay, what level of adherence do you need to sustain the results? And how do we either select people capable of that type of adherence, or how do you motivate people so they can improve their adherence? And it's getting really more difficult, because now we're getting into all this behavioral stuff and personality stuff and social stuff. It's a lot easier just looking at them locked up at the center than it is looking at them trying to manipulate their behaviors out there in the real world. But I feel like we've gotten to the point now where we know what behaviors they need to do. The only big problem now is getting people to consistently do those behaviors. And I'm sure, AJ, that's where you get your frustration is, for example, if we're in the domain of weight loss, we know how to lose weight. There's nobody that we can't come up with this pattern of behavior that'll be successful in losing weight. But getting people to do it's a lot harder than just coming up with, this is what you need to do. actually doing it, it's tough. It's tough business.
Yeah. If you guys were writing the book today, would there be anything you would change, maybe take out, maybe add?
There's a few things that we know now that we didn't know then, but damn little, quite frankly.
Yeah, I've been through it recently, and I was shocked at what a good job we did of not stepping in the mud and saying stupid things. And even though they're, like you say, we keep learning stuff. And at some point, we'll probably need to do an updated version that incorporates some of the new things, add some of the new things in it. But right now, it's remarkable how little I would change. There's nothing I'm embarrassed by in it. And, you can always find things to add, but I think it's a still real solid piece. Which is really shocking when you think about it.
Yeah.
It's been quite a bit of time. And when we were you were reaching out ahead of the curve at that time, and the curve's kind of caught up to it. So now what we're saying at that time was outrageous. Now there's some general ideas that maybe there's something to it. This whole idea of the pleasure trap and the whole influence that dopamine has and the motivational triad. And I remember arguing with you on that because Doug, obviously pleasure-seeking, pain avoidance are things that, would drive behavior. But Doug kept insisting that energy conservation was a part of this triad. And I remember thinking, oh no, he's lost it on this one. That doesn't make sense. How could energy conservation be as a dominant a factor as pain avoidance and pleasure seeking? And of course, it absolutely is. And it's a critical concept, in hindsight now, to understanding why this is so difficult. But, it wasn't obvious even to me at that time. And I'd had, a chance to be bathed in this type of thinking. And yet it still didn't make sense until, we really, really ground through it. But for some reason, I don't know exactly where that came from, but you had that figured out right in the very beginning, right from some of the early conversations we had, you had that motivational triad as being kind of the base.
Yeah. No, I know where I got it. I got it in a throwaway line in an argument in The Selfish Gene by Dawkins. So I immediately recognized the central and critical importance of energy conservation. And it's going to turn out that in the book that Jen and I are writing, it becomes obvious that energy conservation is in fact the central motivating force in all animal behavior. And not only animal behavior, literally the structure of life itself. So it's going to turn out that this is also basically, this is not a principle that's understood even in evolutionary psychology. So this is the, there's a really cool thing about discovery, and that is that, and it's a difficult thing in academia to have happen, believe it or not. And the reason why is that academia is the place where discovery is supposed to take place. And yet that's one of the more difficult places for it to take place, because there's professional incentives and there's ego issues. And more importantly, people are siloed into their workplace. There's a department of biology, department of chemistry, department of psychology. They are not all in the same building, and they aren't all talking to each other. So when I feel incredibly fortunate that Alan and I did not want to do the same thing. We weren't a couple of young kids that wanted to be doctors or lawyers. We were different. And so Alan was obviously an offbeat, completely avant-garde, completely going to do his own thing, and smelled some early truths about health. And turned out his instincts were dead on. And so he was going to do that. Meanwhile, I was always super interested in essentially, emotional, psychological confidence. It's all had to do with being nervous around girls, quite That's where this all came from, by the way. So the truth is that those two things, because of basketball and Jerry West and Chick Hearn, we became incredibly good friends. And as a result of that, those two different domains of interest cross-pollinate each other and then wind up with very interesting conceptual developments. Okay. And out of that, one of the jewels that comes out of that is my alertness to energy conservation. And then notice all the little things that dovetail around this. That one of the more painful things that can happen to an individual is to die and starve to death. And therefore you wind up seeing animal behavior is going to be, how are we going to not do that? Well, we're going to eat. Okay, well, it turns out that's pleasurable. Oh, that's interesting. Turns out it's more pleasurable when there's more energy in the food. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. And so pretty soon you start developing this unbelievably elegant idea about the motivational triad, which is written nowhere else. Okay. And so that frames that becomes our frame of reference for integrating everything that we see with respect to the pleasure trap. And it does so with incredible comprehensive reach. So later, 15 years after that, I'm writing and talking with Jen Hawk about chick shit. And it turns out that we keep seeing energy conservation being involved in human dating decision making. Okay, we keep seeing energy conservation having to do with romance, conflict in partnerships, all career decision making. Like everywhere you look, in attempting to get your kids getting an award at school or having them do well. Well, why is that? Everywhere we look, it turns out we look down into deep biology and we see the principles of energy conservation are casting they're pulling the strings of the motivational levers. So yeah, this and of course with Jen, you're talking about somebody that's a political scientist and a chick that did astrology readings. That's exactly the kind of cross-pollination that's useful. So now Alan is working with Tasha Meyer, which, I've taught Alan everything that I know. And now we have somebody else that is a big time, I don't know, molecular biologist or whatever the hell it is that she is. But the point is that again, cross-pollination. So, and Alan is able now at TrueNorth to have people, he actually sort of almost semi-consciously you've done that. You try to bring in people to cross-pollinate the area to make TrueNorth something that looks like what a university should be, a health university should be, and never is. And of course that happens that sometimes, like I look at some of the people that are there, I'm like, what the hell, Alan? That's BS. We don't. But that's part of the game when it comes to cross-pollination, is that you need to have exposure and enough openness, and yet you need to also have a fundamental discipline and a search for a high principle that sits underneath it. And that's what he's doing with health, and that's what I'm doing with happiness. And those two things still overlap immensely because the underlying principles are consistent.
And now all we need to do is get you to be more disciplined and keep focused so you can get this damn thing written. The stuff I've seen is brilliant. I can't wait to see it. But, chop, chop.
Yeah, that's Alan only knows one gear. Straight ahead. All right, AJ, what else do we have?
All right, we have a few more questions and we can go as long as you guys like. So if you guys were going to give the eulogy at each other's funeral, what would the most important point you'd want to get across?
Well, wait a second now. If I'm giving the eulogy, that means I won.
That's good. That's good.
That damn carrot cake.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, this gets down to my Mount Rushmore idea. So and it comes to also this notion of this rare characteristic of a plan, integrating everything in with a plan. So certainly Alan wanted to have a successful business so that he could be solid in, financially and be secure. But this guy had the chops to have done that by the time he was 30 and running his own law firm. Okay, there'd be no way that this guy would get stopped. He belonged, on Wall Street, right in the middle of all the sharks. And it turned out there'd be a tougher shark than the guys that were already there would have arrived. And there would have been a lot of half-eaten sharks all over Wall Street. So there was no way that was a main motivation. So the motivation was born actually on a backpacking trip where he failed to calculate how many calories we needed to hike in the Sierras. And I bitched about it. Okay. And we were in the tent on about the fourth night out there, and we were having to ration our food. And we were talking about what we were going to eat when we got home. And I was thinking, oh man, I can't wait to eat a pizza. Okay, that's what was in my head. I was thinking about eating a pizza. And Alan I remember the conversation. He's saying, there's something about this food thing. This food thing is a really big deal. Okay. And he goes, when we get back, I'm going to really look into this food thing. Okay. Yeah. There was something profound about that in that trip. He was like, no, this is serious business. So the next thing you know, he's basically quit high school, telling him he's doing independent study. And he's managing a local health food store. The guy wouldn't even hire him, but Alan he wouldn't take no for an answer. And he went into the back and started doing all the work for free. And the guy was too unassertive to kick him out. And so within a couple of months, this 16-year-old kid is running his store. See why I meant about Wall Street? Wall Street had no chance against this guy. Okay. So what happens? So he reads every book on the shelf of the health food store, and he ultimately runs into a guy there named Steve Plant. I believe that guy's name is Plant, who had a horticulture degree and knew about Herbert Shelton and hygiene. And when Alan read hygiene, what he read and didn't know what he was reading, he was reading the theory of evolution. So the theory of evolution is applied to food and humanity and everything else. And it was ringing all the bells of the truth. The truth has a sense of integration to it that is unmistakable. There's other writers there that were pretty smart, and there's books on the shelf that were pretty good, a lot of interesting ideas. But at the end of the day, those concepts felt right. It has a gravitas to them that's like, no, this has to be the right way it is, because it integrates too much information.
I remember thinking that, Shelton talked about the idea that health had a cause.
Yes.
But it wasn't just random.
Right.
And that the cause of health was healthful living. And that healthful living involved diet, sleep, and exercise. Yeah. And that sometimes people got sick because of dietary excess. And fasting was kind of a way of undoing the consequence of dietary excess. And it totally made sense. Well, sure, if you think about it, a lot of the problems people have is because they eat too much or eat the wrong thing. And it makes sense. If you don't eat at all, the body would be able to get rid of some of the stuff that shouldn't be there. And that sleep and exercise and these basic principles would cause health. Instead of just worrying about what caused disease, he was talking about how to make health happen. And so that's where the interest got in.
Yes. Yeah. So the point is that from a very young age, he recognized this, and then he went through the trouble of actually finding out whether or not it was true. And it took him to Australia, and it took him to Dr. Alec Burton's place, and then he knew. So Alan knew by the time he was 22 that he was right and basically everybody else was wrong. That includes our plant-based doctors now that relentlessly chase nutrition and ingredients and vitamins and minerals and stuff, and say that those are going to be things that you need to protect you. Okay, they are fundamentally wrong. And, I don't beat up on them too much because they're doing an awful lot more good than harm. But the point is that the point I'm trying to make of this eulogy is that this young man had it right, and he had it right way early. Okay. He didn't have the personality weaknesses and limitations of people like Shelton or Benish or Alec Burton. These are all wonderful people who made wonderful contributions. But what made Alan unique was that from an early age, he not only had the whole picture right, not most of the picture, he had the whole damn thing right. Okay. A lot of docs out there had a lot of pieces of the picture, a lot of good advice, a lot of good information. They didn't have the whole thing. Show me the doc now that says the most important thing you need to do is shut your mouth and not eat and drink water for 3 weeks. Show 'em, Jimmy. Okay. That is politically incorrect in the extreme. It is so unconventional. It is so against everybody's intuition. Okay. That even the people that we very highly respect don't actually grasp it. Okay. And aren't sufficiently curious. And not only that, people will come to True North. A lot of people, a lot of talented people, capable people, business people, medical people, a lot of smart people and a lot of cool people come there and say, wow, what a really neat place. Wow, you've really done something here. Yeah, you have no idea. They don't have a freaking clue what that took. Okay. It takes courage to stand up and say intelligent things that are somewhat unpopular or unconventional. That's true. And kudos to a lot of the major writers and educators in our field who have been immensely helpful and have helped tremendous numbers of people with their writings. But did you put it all on the line every day for your career? Nope. You didn't put it all on the line. Okay. Alan could have been shut down at any time. Okay. At any time. He was asking to be shut down. Okay. He was like, I don't know, a salmon in the middle of shark infested waters, trying to find a way to get up. That was impossible. I don't know how the hell he did this, except that I do know there's 3 of us that sort of know, 2 of us that sort of know, and 1 of us that knows. 2 of us that sort of know are Jennifer, his wife, and me, his best friend. But the only person that really knows is Alan. But we know because we were close. How many decisions do you have to make with the optimization as the plan? How many times? You start at 22 making those decisions, okay? And you better never make a mistake. Better never make a big one. If you make one, you better be scared out of your mind. People don't know. Nobody else had this kind of pressure. Who else has a facility operating right out front of God and everybody, doing things that, oh, now it looks like it's not so weird. Now everybody talks about fasting. Now, what's that guy's name at USC?
Longo. Walter.
What's that?
Walter Longo.
Longo, yeah. So we got some guys that come out now, 30 years later. Thanks, 30 years. Oh, good for you. You did a little research there. Did you treat human subjects? Did you take on people that have litigious relatives that are ready to frickin' hang you? Did you have people that were like out to say that you're a total quack and that you're a danger to humanity and you ought to be shut down in frickin' jail? Nobody else did that. It's one guy that did it. Everybody could say, wow, wouldn't it be cool if there was a place? Yeah. Well, wouldn't it be cool if there's a place? Yeah, there's one guy that made a place. One guy. Okay, no committee could have got this done. It had to be somebody with a vision that day after day, hour after hour made these calls. And you know the kind of calls that he made? The same kind of calls that I wouldn't have made. Remember those times when I said, oh yeah, well, the person's pulling on the sleeves and the really nice thing to do? No, you had to have somebody that made all those calls right. Today, he's halfway there. Okay, he's got 40 years left to get this thing done. What is he doing? He's attempting to get the most important information ever discovered in the history of health. He's trying to get that information so that it doesn't die with him. These other guys, that were also pioneers with guts, the information almost died with them. Alec Burton, what's left? What's left of Alec Burton, who is a wonderful and intelligent man? What's left of Alec Burton is TrueNorth Health Center. It's the guy, it's the young kid that he trained that turned into Alan Goldhamer, okay? What is already left of Alan Goldhamer? We have the pleasure trap, and we've got a bunch of research. We've got it in major medical journals, okay? And there's more coming. And what he's going to do, and he knows he needs to do, is that he knows that the next young doctors that come behind him that start to do this don't have his chops. They will not take the risk that he did. The bar was way too high. It was way too high, okay? He's now made the bar way lower for other people to do this. Somewhere out there in the future, there are millions of people who would be suffering that if their doctor 60 years from now says, here's our problem, this is what it is that we need to do to fix it, okay? And you know what? A good diet will help, but it's not going to do the job. Okay, you're going to need to do a water fast, and it's going to be shitty, and it's going to feel like something curled up inside your mouth and died in it. There's a whole series of stuff that Alex says, okay? Okay, and they're going to say that, and that person's going to live, or they're going to thrive, or they're going to recover their health, and they otherwise never would have happened, okay? This is the biggest tool and the biggest truth, which is the reason why people are in poor health is because things are out of balance in their body. And the chief reason for that lack of balance is excess, okay? It's not deficiency, people. You know, you can sniff my irritation with all of the attention and all of the glitter and all of the excitement and all of the questions and all of the intuitive belief that the solution is more of something, okay? It is not. Okay, Alan taught me early, clearly, and perfectly. No, that is not what it's about, Doug. It's access, 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 access. The solution is to get rid of it all, okay? And the body will heal itself, okay? This is what he did. This is Mount Rushmore, not of just plant-based health. This is freaking health. Who else has the information, has discovered it and put it in a place where maybe it won't die with him? Maybe. I'm telling you, it's still not clear. This should be practiced. Oh, I know a lot of people that fast. Really? You know anybody, any doctor out there anywhere in the world that is doing pure water-only fasting on extensive basis with huge numbers of people? No, you don't. No, you don't. What an unbelievable lack of ability of humanity to grasp this. The potency of it is incredible. You add this to a plant-based diet and you get it, that's it. No, you're never going to build Rockefeller Center behind this, because we're not full of huckster crap with a bunch of magic pills or anything that's going to supposedly fix it without effort. No, the solution here is the self-discipline and an uncomfortable process and understanding deeply how it is that health actually works, okay? There's other people that are telling parts of it. This is the heart and soul of the story. And this is what he's trying to get. I'm sure it frustrates him that it's like, you can't, I know it does, because I've heard the snide, irritated, sarcastic, but underneath of that is the frustration of, can you believe how they practice medicine? Can you believe how they practice medicine? What do we see today with coronavirus? Everybody wants to add something, add vitamin D, add zinc, add vitamin C, add a vaccine, add. Everybody looks at that and they argue about what it is to add. Where do you have anybody saying what you all need to do is frickin' water fast?
You know, it's interesting. We just finished a case report that we're writing up now. We're just waiting for the follow-up. We had a nurse who had long COVID, so really debilitated. Happened to be a male nurse. And had happened to have a very exhaustive research panel of testing done, IL-6, TNF-alpha, all kinds of acute phase reactive proteins and markers, had that done in the beginning, and it was highly positive. We brought that individual in and fasted them for 40 days. We refed them. They've resolved their symptoms clinically. We're waiting, we have 27 more days, and we get the follow-up exhaustive research panel. Well, we kind of ran a few tests already just to check, and they're already, dramatically better. So we're going to get this follow-up in 27 days, and then we'll be able to publish a really nice, the first case report showing long-term water-only fasting as a means of resolving long COVID and all the symptoms that go along with it. There's a lot of people now suffering as a consequence of this. We're also seeing a lot of people that have had unfortunate reactions to the vaccine, particularly the booster vaccine, where they've gotten symptoms that didn't have any problems maybe with the first round or even the second round, but then they developed these neurological symptoms. And we're hoping that we can do things to resolve the inflammation with fasting there that will also be successful. So publishing some of those things should really piss some people off. And it's absolutely, like you're saying, it's about doing nothing. Just getting rid of everything, giving the body a chance to reboot. And now we're in a nice position because we can actually get it published in major impact journals because we figured out how to cloak ourselves along with colleagues that are at major institutions. Like the study we most recently published was with our friends at the Mayo Clinic. And when they see the Mayo Clinic come in, they read it. If they see, Alan Goldhamer at TrueNorth Health, it may not, the envelope may not even get opened. But once they open it and then they read it, we've been able to be successful at getting published in some big impact journals. We have a number of papers coming out this year. So I think you're absolutely right in the sense that the key is getting rid of everything that's actually causing the problem rather than looking to sell some pill or potion to mitigate the symptoms.
Yeah. Nobody else would have done it. Nobody. I've never met anybody that would have done this. So this is the dude that did it.
Guys, it's up to you how long we go because everybody loves watching you. It's just if you want to come back or we have like 6 more questions.
Well, there's not anybody that we love listening more to than ourselves talk. So.
Okay, then I'll go on with the questions. Okay. Now, I told people that
so
we weren't
true,
going to,
by the way. Go ahead.
well, it's good that you guys can make each other laugh. I told people that we weren't going to take specific medical questions, that they could have consults with the TrueNorth Health Center or the psychological ones with Dr. Lyle personally. But one of them I'd like just for you guys to answer, just because it's somebody I know very well whose mother is going through chemotherapy. And they wanted to know if you recommend fasting before the chemotherapy infusions, during. Could you please speak to that?
So there is some evidence, mostly stuff done by Walter Longo, looking at the effect that fasting might have at reducing some of the damage that's done by chemotherapy. He did an interesting study with rats. They had 30 rats. They're, genetically bred rats where they induce cancer. And they give enough chemotherapy to kill all the cancer cells. But unfortunately, all the rats die. And that's one of the problems is with cancer, you have to kill all the cells or they grow back. But if you kill all the cells, the organism dies. And so it's very difficult to get that, perfect dosing. Well, he took the same rats with the same cancer and the same chemotherapy, but he fasted the rats before, during, and after the therapy. All 30 rats survived, dramatically enhancing cancer-free survival. And what they realized, there's this process of differential stress sensitivity and differential stress factors that make healthy cells protected in the fasting state, in this ketoacidotic state. Healthy cells are somewhat less vulnerable to the effects of chemotherapy, and the cancer cells are actually more vulnerable to chemotherapy because cancer cells have a higher metabolic rate. They don't compete as well in this high fat environment, this ketone rich environment, whereas healthy cells were designed and evolved with the ability to handle ketosis. They had to handle it because when spring came late, there was nothing to eat. Animals that didn't have that capacity to adapt to fasting didn't survive. Whereas cancer cells don't have that as effective ability. And so therefore the cancer cells appeared to be more vulnerable to the positive effects of chemotherapy. So what bottom line was, the use of appropriate fasting in rats made rats survive better and live longer with this situation. He also pointed out to me that some of the biomarkers that predict cancer survival improved whether you gave chemotherapy or not, just by doing the fasting itself. And so that's being investigated further now, exactly what combination of therapies and or fasting are most optimum. And so I think lots of potential there. What we do know is that there are some forms of cancers, particularly solid organ cancer, that just fasting alone is not going to be sufficient to resolve the problem. And so it's worth considering what combination of therapies would be optimal. On the other hand, we've published some very interesting data in lymphoma, which is a type of lymph cancer, where just fasting has been successful at inducing remission. In fact, we've just now published, we've just got a follow-up, 6-year follow-up on the papers that patient we published in the British Medical Journal over the last 6 years now. So she's 8 years from diagnosis and is currently cancer-free, does well. Well, since then, we've had a number of lymphoma patients come in, including recently a patient with a large abdominal mass that you can actually feel going down during fasting. And as we get these follow-up data, because now it's not enough to just show they get well in fasting, you have to show that they can stay well at 6 weeks, at 6 months, at a year. As we get more of those back, we'll be publishing these follow-up case reports and ultimately hope to do a clinical trial. Now, that'll be where it gets disturbing. In other words, if we publish enough case reports where it looks like it's not just we got lucky, so that you can justify a clinical trial, and the clinical trial shows that it's effective, which we believe it is, now that's going to be very uncomfortable for conventional medicine, because that means they're going to have to offer that crazy radical therapy as an option. Because with a well-published clinical trial that shows this is dramatically more effective than the current state of the art, it's not going to be something that can be just ignored. And so if we can manage to slip that through the system and get it published in credible journals, you will see fasting opportunities being able to be offered in more conventional places. And again, that'll make a lot of people happy. It'll make a lot of people really uncomfortable. And that'll be fun.
Yeah, just put a big old target on your back now. Oh man. There you go.
You know, the thing is, though, every time we publish a paper in one of these major impact journals, it makes us a little bit less vulnerable, because, you know, the fact is they're not all excited about publishing this kind of radical stuff. In fact, if you look at the British Medical Journal, where we published our case report on lymphoma, there's never been a paper published like that ever in the past, or, you know, likely too quick in the future. But once you start breaking those doors down, then it gets a little easier. And now we get a little better reviews, and then people have heard about it, and the chance of actually getting published is better. Then the chance of influencing physicians that are thoughtful is better. And now, you know, and that's starting to happen now. It's a lot easier now than it was 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, for sure.
Cool. Really cool.
You know, we talked about the fact that it might be really difficult to get this stuff published, no matter how well we did it, because there's so much resistance to publishing contrary information. But one of the things that we hadn't realized at that time is that it's possible to affiliate with people that are inside the system and kind of sneak the data in. All you have to do is make the principal authors one of the people that's coming from one of these conventional sources, and then it's a lot easier. And then once the data is in the literature, it doesn't really matter who published it. The data is there. And so it makes it easier to plan. And that's where we've been very successful. This year, people that are interested can go to our website at fasting.org, and which is the foundation's information fasting website. And so all of the articles that we're publishing will appear there. And you'll start seeing this year, we have a number of papers that are now in review or have been accepted and are going to be coming out, covering a wide variety of biometric changes that occur in fasting, fasting safety issue, fasting in relation to various conditions. It's going to get really hard to deny because, you know, with the residents that train here, they say the same thing over and over again. Wow, it's the first time I've ever seen anybody with this condition get well. Because under conventional treatment, you never get well. They promise you, if you do what you're told, you'll be on drugs the rest of your life and you'll never get well. They're very honest about it right up front. They say you can't cure hypertension because we don't know what causes it. So you just take these pills with their side effects of chronic cough, fatigue, impotence, and premature death, and just accept your lot. Whereas our experience is very different. Now we're able to prove that. And so show it's safe, show it's effective, show where it's effective. The big challenge is, how do you get people after they're well to stay well? And how do you deal with all that psychology crap?
Yeah.
I'm asking. That's a question.
Yeah, well.
How do you deal with the psychology crap?
A book and 10 videos.
Yeah.
We have so many nice comments. I can't read them. We can't read all the comments, but a lot of them are, Dr. Lyle, people love your laugh. And Dr. Goldhamer, they say that you have an evil laugh.
There, that's about right.
Hey,
Right.
AJ, I got to share this with you. I just thought of this. We got we submitted an article, not cloaked by one of our colleagues. We just sent it straight from the center, and we sent it to one of the big endocrinology journals, and it was rejected. The person said it was a well-written article, but it was the most egregious violation of human safety standards that he'd ever witnessed in 25 years as being an editor of a journal. Because what we did is we took people, they fasted for 2 weeks, and then we looked at their body composition changes. And they said they hoped that the victims of this abuse were not permanently damaged by this barbaric behavior. And of course, our research director, who's a PhD postdoc from Columbia, was feeling like, oh, they think we're evil and damaging people. And of course, I'm thinking, hey, he said it. We're number one. We're the most egregious violation he's ever heard of. And it never is a bad thing to be number one.
There we go.
Never. All right. So this question is a scenario question. And the reason I can ask it is because I think you both can answer it. It's a story you've probably heard before, where somebody can be very compliant in home. They have a clean environment, but they work in healthcare like a nurse, where there's always, hyper palatable snacks, and they fall off the wagon there. And so they can't get it together. What do people do in a case where they can't clean the environment because it's their work?
Well, if they're a really good nurse and they're that conscientious, they should immediately quit their job and come join us at the TrueNorth Health Center, where you can do something worthwhile with your life instead of working for the evil empire.
Oh my. All right. Now we'll have the person with empathy answer. I think that what that question is betraying is exactly where we started today, which is that this is way more difficult than anybody reasonably imagines. So we're looking for some simple answer to this, and we already know that this thing, is what would we say? What is your personality like? How, you have to be unusually motivated, and you have to have an unusual personality to actually be determined here. So there's stuff at your work. So what? Are you motivated enough to pack your food? Okay. Are you motivated enough to experiment enough in your kitchen to have things that are entertaining and interesting and varied enough that when you pack your food and you bring it, are you going to be in a position to eat that right in front of who else is going to watch and then put up with the cross-examination? Okay, this is what it is. So of course, the actual technical actions that are involved here are very simple. That the psychology and the computation of the pleasure trap variables that underlie this make it exceedingly difficult. Okay, because this species is designed by nature to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy. And so as a result of that, they're finding just a little shift in the environment, and now they're in trouble. So what do? You run experiments on preparation. So if you're serious about this, you have to get serious about, preparing diligently and seeing how a week goes, where you say, I'm going to run an experiment and I'm going to be ruthless about this. And whatever it is that comes up in my way and what tugs at me, I can sure as hell get through 5 days, 5 lunches, or 5 afternoon breaks, I have to prepare for what, 10 little interludes? What's it going to be? So that's what's involved here.
I have patients that are alcoholics that are working as bartenders, and they're very successful. And maybe that's not the first job you'd recommend to a newly sober individual. But the fact is, if I can have an alcoholic be successful at abstaining from alcohol and working as a bartender, then I think that it's also possible people that struggle with weight issues may be able to come up with a strategy to work in an environment like Everywhere, where they're basically trying to get them caught in the pleasure trap.
Yeah.
Do you think some people use their environment, whether it's the home or work environment, as an excuse to not do
Well,
this?
I don't think it's an excuse. I think it's a reason. I think the reality is, if you're in an environment like Doug and I work in, where there's little temptation, then there's little effort it takes to resist temptation. But if you're in an environment where everybody's shoving stuff at you and it bangs on the nervous system in your brain because it's calorically dense food with all the scents and all the things that go along with that, it's hard work. I think it wears people down. Even if they're successful at not indulging, I think they take a toll. And that's why I'm not really joking when I say, change your environment, because it's a tough burden to play, especially for a normal nervous system, to have to constantly be put into that sensation. It's not just the temptation of you wanting to eat it. It's you and your thin body make them sick. And they oftentimes try to undermine your behavior by trying to trip you up, because it creates cognitive dissonance in them. You come in with your thin clothes and your perky smile. And so they'll do things to try to make your life tougher. And it's hard for people to put up with stuff like that.
Wow. Thanks. Well, more questions. I've got 4, or you can come back.
Right. We'll try to knock them out.
Okay, here we go. All right.
Let Alan answer. He takes too long.
Okay. You both have been part of healthy living since your early teens. You've seen a lot. Are there any events, peoples, or discoveries that stand out for each of you?
Yeah, for me, reading John McDougall's book, The McDougall Program, was very important because, number one, he was a medical doctor telling the truth, and it became a popular book, which meant, there was other people besides us that thought it was good. I think he played a really important role, and he built on another really courageous guy named Nathan Pritikin, who was really one of the first ones to kind of conceptualize some of this plant-based eating. And another one for me was one of my heroes, which is T. Colin Campbell, who was a conventional scientist who wrote a book. Even though Dr. Lyle didn't think it was going to be a huge bestseller, we both agreed that he had done a good job of telling the truth and bringing his experience and his way of thinking about things into his books. And so for me, those are all really important. Probably the biggest effect on me, though, was reading and understanding Pleasure Trap. Really getting that, how the motivational triad drove human behavior and all of the downstream implications that came about. I still, even to this day, it still, surprises me how good a job Doug had done conceptually, really pulling all those different things together in a meaningful way. I've never seen anything like that. I don't think anybody else has done that good a job conceptually at trying to, tie it all together.
Yeah, all good. Next.
Okay, so you don't want to answer that one, Dr. Lyle?
We could add some other things. I remember meeting Dr. Esselstyn, and that was very cool. Alan showed me an email like, oh, this guy's a big thing. He's interested in us. And I'm like, yeah, he'll never. No, he's too fancy. He'll never. Turns out we wind up very tight, which was great. So it's been surprising for me, even sort of meeting and then befriending people like McDougall and Campbell and Esselstyn. Alan's inherently pushy and fearless, so I would have been intimidated and wouldn't have felt like we had anything to say that they'd be, not that they shouldn't have listened to, but I wouldn't think that anybody would listen to us. We used to be young, AJ, that we were really young once. And the truth is, we were really young with some really big ideas that were unconventional. And so no, I didn't expect to wind up with some colleagues that we respected, and then wind up having that reciprocated. So that's been a cool thing.
I remember being with Burton in Australia, and I kind of manipulated my way into training with him. I approached him when I was a teenager, and I said, "Oh, I want to be a doctor like you." And he patted me on the head and he said, "Well, that's nice. You go become a doctor and then come talk to me." And then 7 years later, I had gone through school and I had gotten ready, and I said, "Okay, I'm ready." And he said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm the guy you promised to train if I went to school, and I just spent 7 years going to school, so I'm ready." And he got a little white, and he said, "Well, I got to talk to the boss." He went and talked to Nejla, and they agreed to have me come out and train. But anyway, we're out there, and we've got this patient, and she fasts for 30 days, and we had to break the fast because her potassium got out of line, and we fed her, and then we started fasting her again, and she's still no better. She's got lupus, and she's got all kinds of symptoms. And then we get through the second fast, she gets depleted again. We have to break. And then finally, I'm saying to Burton, I said, "Gee, you keep fasting her, like, she's not getting any better." And he said that I should learn to keep my eyes open and my mouth shut, and I might learn something. And sure enough, on that third fast, she came good and ended up having a really good outcome. But I remember him just realizing he had this incredibly deep sense of confidence based on his experience. And even though he couldn't tell me exactly when stuff was going to come good, you just had to, go by the principles. And, and he had anyway, so I learned a little bit about keeping eyes open and mouth shut and how valuable that can be.
Great, thank you. Are there some things that you see as important changes in the future of healthy living?
Well, the biggest motivation the biggest motivation we know is people that are driven by pain, debility, and fear of death. So I'm very confident there are going to be a lot of highly motivated people ready to adopt the principles of healthful living.
There may be some things. There may be new tools, new ways, cartoons, feedback systems, iPhone apps. There may be. I've often said that I could get people to eat better if we had a feedback system that could instantaneously give them a feedback about what that did to their health. So people would diet much more effectively if they knew that at the end of the day, they could see that they actually lost 2.6 ounces of fat. They would be like, wow, okay. They would actually get used to what the truth is. The truth isn't that you don't lose 2 pounds in a day. That never happens. You lose a couple ounces, and then you lose a couple ounces the next day, and a couple ounces the next day, and then you eat a bunch of shit, and then you gain an ounce. So the point is that I could see the possibility. I don't think that human beings are completely defeated with respect to this. I think with potentially accurate feedback mechanisms that are essentially biofeedback mechanisms that are sensitive, people can course correct. This is no different in principle than the process of science. So what Alan is attempting to do now, that I've abandoned, is to actually get the correct information out in the world so that it starts impacting brains of all kinds of very intelligent professionals, so that there's essentially a chain reaction, so that 50 years from now, humanity actually understands what the hell to do, okay? If they understand what the hell to do, it won't be humanity in general, it will be the experts in health that understand. And if an expert in health tells you this is what you need to do to get better, and that expert knows that it's true, then they're going to have the kind of confidence that Alec Burton had, except that they'll have a whole matrix of information and scholarship behind them, so they'll even be more confident than Burton was, okay? So what I see coming is that the new information is the only agent of change. And so, better information, better ways to communicate the truth about what's actually happening in your body, that future has essentially unlimited potential. and that we can look out over the horizon. How far things go in the next 20 or 30 years, they could go quite a ways with AI and sensitive machinery, feedback mechanisms, the ability to possibly analyze your blood just by waving it in front of a sensor without actually having to prick your finger. These kinds of things may give humanity in general a much better opportunity to find their way. I know that will be true for the small minority of people with unusual personality, unusual awareness and intelligence and motivation to do this. It's going to get easier for us. It's going to potentially be able to spread wider with technological and educational tools of the future. Maybe. We'll see.
Great. Thank you. All right. As you look back on your careers, have you accomplished what you set out to do, and where do you both go from here?
Well, I would say that Alan's in the middle of what he accomplished to do, what he was out to do. I think that I think he can probably look back and say, he certainly succeeded by any reasonable measure. He succeeded brilliantly. Nobody would have figured, Alec Burton wouldn't have seen a clinic like this, and thousands of patients that have gone through, and all the scholarship that's going on, and the success into the medical publication world. No way. Okay, so of course that's been super successful, but I think the real mission that Alan's actually been after is to correct a gaping, massive, conflicted, political, perversely incentivized misunderstanding about the nature of health and disease to humanity. And so in that, he's a very early pioneer, and he is sort of he's paving, he's cutting a path through the wilderness. So God knows how far he can go. Okay, but the good news is you don't have to, quote, get there wherever it is to do a tremendous amount of good for the individuals. With every day that passes, somebody walks into TrueNorth Health Center and has their life turned around. Okay, so this is not a theoretical process. This isn't an academic exercise. It's a growing, alive process that just gets bigger and wider and hopefully metastasizes, to use an unfortunate mixed haywire metaphor, but hopefully it goes all over the world and all through human understanding. So that's good. For me, I'm similarly halfway, in the sense that I understand a great deal about how to remove unnecessary human suffering, and I am out to try to synthesize those insights and to put them in a form that people can read and learn and listen to and understand. Same thing. Both of us are revolutionaries. He's a complete revolutionary in health, and I'm a revolutionary in clinical psychology. Both of those revolutions have exactly the same roots. They have their roots in the intuition that it is the deep biology is run according to evolutionary process, and that if your techniques and your interventions and what it is that you want to accomplish and what's wrong, and your analysis of what's wrong is ignorant of evolutionary process, you are doomed to fail to varying degrees, no matter how far your theory and intervention goes away from that understanding. Is going to be the degree of the unnecessary suffering that's going to go on. So yeah, it's an interesting, I haven't quite thought about this question, but I'm just in saying it. Like we remain on parallel and integrated paths.
You're going to feel a lot better once you finish this book, because then you'll have permanently conceptualized, at least that block of information.
Right.
And so until that's done, you're never going to really find peace.
Yes, I'm well aware of that. But but that's where we are, AJ. I feel like we're it's kind of weird to think. I think both of us feel, I don't know about Alan, but I feel like we feel so healthy, and we are. And I don't think either one of us feels our quote age. I think both of us feel this feeling that, God, I feel like we should only be 30% or 35% through this journey. That's what it feels like to me. And so we have to be careful to make sure we use our time. I think we're both aware that our time is more limited than our intuition tells us, and that we have to use our time super wisely to accomplish the things that we most want to accomplish. I actually, if I had, another 50 years, I would be standing right next to Alan and Tasha Meyer, and I would be grinding out and pounding, trying to pound down and slither this information into the world. And I'd be happy to spend 50 years right next to Alan, just freaking doing this incredibly worthwhile journey and vision. I felt the sands of time on me, around 50. And it was like, you know what, if I'm going to do what it is that burns in me most, which is to reach further into the interpersonal dynamics of human relationships and self-confidence, self-esteem, if I'm ever going to do that, I have to do that. I have to get away from the health arena. I'll never leave the health arena. I'll completely integrated in it, but I have to push myself away from that and swim, out to another little island.
Well, that's clearly the right decision too.
Yeah.
That's the greatest good. You have to do that.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. But you need to do it effectively and efficiently, and not let life continue to distract you from doing, the work. The limiting factor, think about it, is if there was no distraction, it's not like there's anything that would limit you from completing that task. You know what I mean? It's not, the conceptual stuff is there. You don't need more time to come up with you just need time to grind out the hard work of writing it out.
Now people see why I moved out of your house. Now they see. That's how it is. All right, AJ, what else do we have?
Right, well, we have one last question, but I'm curious, how long did you live together when you worked on this?
Well, it took about 2 years to do the pleasure trap, didn't it, Doug?
No, I was there for 4 years.
4 years, but it took about 2 years to do the pleasure trap.
Well, it was
you worked for about 2 years of it. And
did he consume any carrot cake while under your roof?
Not that he knew about.
No, we didn't have carrot cake at the house. That would have been out, and we didn't go out very much. So
Dr. Goldhamer, before we go to the last question.
In fairness, though, we played a lot of basketball too. And, one of the things about Doug is he's really good at integrating information and figuring out how to do it better. And recently, after decades of playing basketball, he actually figured out how shooting works, the act of shooting. And it was able in, I think, 1 or 2 days, I don't know, maybe mostly in 1 day, and maybe a little bit of reinforcement, was able to completely change how I do that. Now think about that. I've done it a certain way for decades, right? Thousands and thousands of hours of doing it a certain way, completely changed it, dramatically improved it, and it has allowed me to continue to play basketball competitively, because now I can shoot from much farther out accurately than I was able to do before. Now, if I could have done that on my own, I would have done it on my own. It's not like I hadn't been thinking about it. In fact, the very same stuff that he used to figure out how it works, I had seen, I was aware of, but wasn't able to, for whatever reason, put it together. That's the unique thing of him, is be able to take that information and put it into a useful form, like the Pleasure Trap book and like learning how to shoot properly. And by the way, this morning went really well.
Good, grand.
But Dr. Goldhamer, I just want to make sure I didn't skip over you for that question. Did you set out to do everything you intended in your career?
Not even close. No, I mean, I'm 20 years behind where we're supposed to be by now, but we are making progress. And I think that we'll catch up in the next couple of years with what we should have done in the last 10 years. There's been a lot of distractions that are not voluntary distractions, just honestly dealing with medical legal issues and dealing with the challenges have kept us from being as productive and efficient as we should be. We're overcoming some of that. And now hopefully we'll see a smooth stream of production. And we have a really clear path. We had certain things we had to publish, like the safety of fasting and its efficacy. We had to get case reports to justify clinical trials. We now have an affiliation with one of the large health maintenance organizations that will give us an opportunity to recruit patients with, at first, hypertension and lymphoma, where we can compare and contrast accurately what we do versus just the standard of care, and showing whether or not it in fact works a whole lot better, proving the ultimate goal, which is that we're right and everybody else is wrong. So Doug, by the way, I don't need everybody to adopt these principles. I just have to compellingly and convincingly prove to every reasonable person's satisfaction that we're right and they're wrong. It can be the next generation that figures out how to do all that psychology stuff and implements it and hopefully sees it spread, or not, just as long as we prove we're right.
Alan, we've had many entertaining conversations, as you can imagine, but one of them was, I can't remember what we were talking about, but I was gloating about us. And I was talking about how good we were, and Alan said, "No, Doug, we're really not very good. It's just that everybody else is so lousy." So that he keeps me on an even keel. All right.
Right. All right. So this is here's a great way to end it for both of you. If you tried to summarize the most important messages you have learned about health, what might each of you want to say?
Health results from healthful living. You want to be healthy, you have to pay the price. That means eat a healthy diet. Our version is a whole plant food, SOS-free diet. Get appropriate exercise, bountiful sleep, and recognize that fasting may be a way of helping you make up for if for some reason you weren't absolutely perfect all along the way.
Well,
my addition to that would be the compassionate psychological side of that, which is that healthful living is an awful lot harder than you think it is. And it is likely to be filled with temptations and weaknesses and traps and limitations of your personality and your situation. And so since you cannot change your personality, you must change your situations. And so that's that is the story. You do what Alan says, and then when you try and you get stopped, we have to learn our way around this because this is going to be hard.
wow. Guys, thank you so much. This was such a wonderful kickoff to season 3. You're both invited back anytime, separately, together. I really appreciate what you do. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, AJ.
The pleasure was mine. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow when we have 2 shows at 11 a.m. We have Dr. Nathan Bryan. He is considered the world's leading expert on nitric oxide, and he's going to be talking about why it's important. And at 3 p.m., we have food addiction expert Dr. Joan Iflin talking about 8 ways that processed food harms your cells. Thank you so much, Doug and Alan, and congratulations on your lifelong friendship. Bye-bye.
Thank you. We'll see you, AJ.